Next, we're going to record the process of buffering by capturing the Python that's created when you do that process. So first, we're going to create a brand new project. Then we're going to drag and drop the road center lines from our desktop into our current session. It's going to ask us what transformation to do. We're going to pick the first one, the UTM zone 10, click OK. And there's our road center lines. You'll notice in the bottom right corner, it says EPSG 26910. That's the UTM coordinate system we're going to be using. So first we need to do is go to the processing toolbox, and we're going to search for buffer. There. And under vector geometry, we double click on buffer, and we're going to buffer these road center lines by 3 meters. So I'll just change that to 3 meters. I'll leave the segments the same. I'll leave the round cap style and join style as round. We're going to leave the miter limit as 2 meters. I'm not going to dissolve the result. By checking dissolve result, basically any buffers that touch will be merged into one big buffer. We're going to have separate buffers for each segment of line. Next, we're going to leave the temporary layer alone, so it'll actually just create a temporary layer, won't create a file or anything, and we'll open up the output file when we're done. So let's click Run to create those 3 meter buffers. And I'll close this dialog box. And if you zoom in, there's the 3 meter buffers around each of the road center lines. Now here's something very magical. Under processing, we go to the history of our processing. And the most recent one, the one I just ran, I highlight it. And if you look down below, I've got some Python code here. Basically what it did is it captured everything I did with the buffer, including where the file was, the 3 meter distance, and so on, even the temporary output, and put it into this Python page. In fact, I can just grab all that Python, right click and go copy, close this, and we're going to use that to create a Python script to do that whenever we want to. So let's do a couple of things. First, I'm going to close the processing toolbox, and I'm going to create a brand new project. Let's just discard everything, discard, and start again. We're going to drag and drop that road center line back into our project. We're going to click OK for the UTM. So yes, it says EPSG 26910 at the bottom corner. There's our road center lines. Only this time, instead of running the processing tools under here, we're actually going to open up our Python console. We're going to click on Show Editor, and we're going to paste what we just created into the editor. Now there's a few things I want to do. The first thing I want to do is put a carriage return, or press enter before it, and create a variable. And this variable will become the buffer location. And basically, I'm going to put the buffer location in the temp directory. So I'll just say C // temp, because that's the folder I'm going to put in there. And I'll just call it my buffer.shapefile. So that's what we're going to be creating. So that's the destination, is my buffer location. The nice thing about Python is that I could put a carriage return or an enter right in the middle of my function just by putting a backslash and pressing enter. So after each comma, I'm just going to put a backslash, enter. It'll make it much more readable on the line because I've got this small area I'm working with right now. I can move it over a little bit. So let's go to the end of that. And after that comma, I'm going to go backslash and enter. And after each comma, I'm going to do that just to make this readable. Again, after the 5 segments, the end cap 0 being round, join style 0 being round as well. Okay, and just after the miter limit of 2 and the dissolve false. And then the output, I'm going to remove the temporary output and replace it with the buffer location right here. So I'll copy that and paste that right here. No single quotes around that. So now what we have is I'm going to dump out this buffer into a file rather than just temporarily inside of my QGIS session. So now I've got an actual file that's going to be created, my buffer.shape, and it's called buffer location. So again, we're going to use that road center lines as our input with 3 meter buffers, 5 segments, and so on. And then finally, if I were to run this, it would not add to my current session. Just before I go any further, I want to save this. So I'm going to hit save. I'm just going to call it buffer.py on my desktop. I already did this before, so it's there, but for you, you won't have this. So just put buffer.py on your desktop and save it. So now you've got buffer.py. I'm just going to close that script was saved, and there we are. So there's one more thing I need to do. What I need to do is add this layer to my current map, because even though the script saves it as creating a buffer, it doesn't actually do the last step of adding it to your map. You have to do that manually with Python. So as we've seen before, we'll go iFace, so that use the interface, and we're going to add a vector layer. And the layer will become the buffer location. So there we go, the buffer location, you know, that temp file. So once it's created, and I'm just going to add, because it'll use the file name in the legend anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3M, meaning 3 meter buffers, just so you can see that it's a 3 meter buffer. So I'll have buffer location, 3 meters. That's just going to be part of the label that's created. This is an OGR process. Okay, so that's an open source OGR process. Oh, don't forget to save your Python. Okay, so let's run this Python now that the road center lines are currently in our project. We haven't done this before. So let's hit run script. It runs. And sure enough, there's your 3 meter buffers, because it's called my buffer and 3M. We zoom in, and there are our 3 meter buffers. And if you look under your C drive, there's my buffers under temp. So we actually have a new file called my buffer under the C temp file. We've actually processed this. We now have a new layer added manually using Python, and we have a Python page for adding it. So you see the power of being able to capture any of the processing we do in the processing toolbox can be captured in the history, and then you can just copy and paste it into a Python page and reuse that process over and over again and customize it the way you want to.